Good day to you all. Welcome to this DevOps webinar supported by EXIN. My name is Simone van Zuilen and I will be your host today. Today I'm with Mike Orzen. Mike Orzen is the father of Lean IT. He has over more than 25 years of experience in consulting and coaching in the IT space. Mike's passion for continual improvement and effective enterprise excellence methods help build a healthier organizational culture within IT and throughout the enterprise. This includes the successful application of Lean, Agile, and DevOps in various industries. He is considered a pioneer of Lean applied to information and technology. Mike is a co-author of the award-winning books Lean IT, Enabling and Sustaining Your Lean Enterprise and the Lean IT Field Guide. The webinar today will be, as you can see, Lean, Agile, and DevOps, how to make them play well together. We have an interesting development in the IT community. It has to do with the tension between seemingly different frameworks and models. It's almost impossible to open a website or a publication about IT without coming across ITIL 4, DevOps, Agile, or Lean. Are these approaches at odds with one another? How do you know which is right for your organization? Mike will take you through the relationship between Lean, Service Management, Agile, and DevOps. Note you're all on mute. You can ask questions during using the chat function throughout the webinar. At the end, all questions will be addressed. The webinar will be recorded and you will receive the recording or the PowerPoint slides later this week. Enjoy the webinar. Over to you, Mike. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Simona. I'm really pleased to be here. It's kind of early in the States, but I've been looking forward to this talk. So good day to everyone. So what we're going to try to do is try to reconcile these extremely popular frameworks, but at times they can be seen as at odds with each other. So very much like perhaps children, how do we get them to play well together? Simone did a pretty good introduction on me, so I'm not going to go through all of this stuff. But I've been doing this for a long time, and I've seen a lot of changes in the IT community, and I think it's time that we really need to align our frameworks and our approach as we move forward. So let's just jump into it. I'd like to suggest that we have a problem, but we also have an opportunity. We've got really three large bodies of knowledge, and actually more than these three, but these are the three I want to focus on today. Of course, we have Lean Thinking and applied to IT, so Lean IT. We've got the Agile community. We've got the relatively newly emerging DevOps community. But what I've noticed is at times we're spending a great deal of effort saying, no, we're not doing Lean, we are an Agile shop, or we're not interested in DevOps, we're doing Lean IT. And I think we may be missing the point. So what I'd like to talk about is how do we cross this bridge so we don't see ourselves on different sides of the river, because we're really not. We're all part of the same value stream, and it's very important that we're clear on how we communicate and how we align. What we've got right now is a lot of non-value added activity. So the first thing I'm seeing is exclusivity, where we exclude certain bodies of knowledge and certain departments and certain people. I was at an organization just last week, and the infrastructure group said we're really not interested in the Lean concepts. And I thought, what do you mean you're not interested in Lean concepts? You are living Lean concepts as you try to use infrastructure as code. So I thought it was fascinating that we kind of start to exclude ideas and people and departments. And what this does is actually reinforce silos. And we know that IT has always battled with silos and with kind of tunnel vision, deep but not wide understanding, and the expertise and the focus inherent in in information technology. So this really reinforces the wrong thing. And I believe that ultimately, sometimes we can be missing the point. And what I mean by that is, this is not about implementing a certain framework or a certain tool or a certain methodology or even a certain technology. This is about creating customer value to enable the business to succeed. And often these different camps actually encourage us to work at cross ends. Very, very expensive. It's wasteful and it's expensive because we end up working at cross purposes. I see an incredible amount of time and energy spent talking about the differences in the frameworks or terminology or definitions, which again is not value add, very expensive. And unfortunately, what this does is erode confidence. Leadership starts to say, was this a mistake? Did we use the wrong framework? We're kind of debating. It's like a battle of ideas. And this can be very healthy if done properly. But when we look at it as an either or, in other words, well, we're doing lean IT or we're doing DevOps. Agile was good, but it's created a bottleneck in operations, so we're going to stop doing Agile. That kind of talk leads to fatigue and exhaustion and a loss of confidence, and certainly in leadership who's writing the check, certainly in managers who need to reinforce the new behavior, and perhaps most importantly in the frontline workers who just get change fatigue and say, you're killing me here. I just want to do my job. Leave me alone. So it's very important to realize that lean applied to IT is actually really, really new. If we're not going to go through this entire slide today, we don't have the time. But if you look at this timeline, you can see that lean has been around for modern lean. What we think of as lean thinking has been around for over 100 years. But you can go back to the mid-1500s and find evidence of continuous flow. So these concepts are not new at all. But if you look at really this century, right around, this last 100 years, 110 years, this is where the bulk of lean thinking came from. And we went from scientific management to engaging people. And then really, if you come to the modern era, what you're looking at is what I like to call the age of integration, where we've said, hey, lean and lean thinking applies to service, supply chain, healthcare, IT, and everything that we do. Lean manufacturing goes back to the 1940s and really World War II. So this is a long, long time ago. But if you move forward, we weren't even applying lean concepts explicitly until the Agile Manifesto. We were doing things in practice, but that was really the first time it was codified. And that was in the early 2000s, I think 2001 or 2002. Then from there, you can see that DevOps days and the concept, the emergent concepts of DevOps was just starting to come in. I want to say around 2005, 2006, somewhere around there. Then when you go from there, you can see that I co-authored my first book, Lean IT. That was around 2011. And that was a request of some people that said, you're applying lean concepts to IT enterprises. Why don't you write about it? And then a very good friend of mine, Gene Kim, 3 years later, published the Phoenix Project. Now, the reason I want to impress this slide on you is to realize that we are really in an emergent period of discovery. So this is a work in process. This is not a finished body of knowledge by any means. So we need to be a lot more flexible and a lot more inclusive in the way that we look at these frameworks. So let's go a little deeper. Most people are familiar with lean thinking. But often we either just pick a piece of it or miss the overall point. We always start right here by creating value and understanding customer value. That's nothing new. But from how do we create value, we need to understand and manage the value stream. And we could spend 3 days talking about value stream management and value stream mapping. But from there, once we understand and manage the value stream, we need to create and flow values. So we have to create that value, which you're already doing. But the key thing that you see in both Agile and DevOps is this emphasis on flow. So we want to eliminate waste. We want to eliminate delays. We want to eliminate unnecessary complexity and variation so the product moves, the service moves, the information moves, and we have no delays. Often we need to create a pull system. You are probably familiar with Kanban. So the whole idea there is we want a system where we eliminate our bottlenecks by regulating the flow of work to create a smooth, level flow. And perhaps the most important piece is we need to keep improving. I call it improve forever. Now, this is a cycle. But what I notice many organizations, although they've seen this, they almost pick and choose. They say, well, of course, we understand value, but they may dabble with value stream management, but they don't go there very deeply. They talk about flow. Sometimes they skip pull altogether. And one thing that's often missing is any kind of true continuous improvement. Now, we've been talking about continuous service improvement in the IT community for decades. But if you really look in the mirror and ask yourself, what are we doing to improve on a daily basis? That's what continuous truly means. Most organizations don't know how to translate that into specific behavior. So Lean brings with us a deceptively simple but extremely insightful cycle of truly how to create and flow value to the customer. Why is this important? Well, we want velocity. We want speed. We all know and feel the pressure of getting solutions to market quickly, break fix resolution quickly, root cause analysis quickly, standing up a new system as quickly as possible. We know the pressure that we all live in terms of speed and quickness. But at the same time, what Lean talks about is we must start with an emphasis on quality at the source before we think about speed and velocity. When we move to Agile software development, we've got a very specific set of behaviors and rituals that work extremely well in many areas. In IT, we often think of software development, and that, I would say, is the primary poster child or best example of Agile. But it turns out Agile thinking can be applied to many other things. Project management is a great example of this. But when we look at Agile software development, what I love about it is when Agile first started in the manifesto, they really pretty much proclaimed that they were using lean thinking applied to IT. So it was very explicit, it was very clear, and it turned into much more of an emphasis of outcomes versus processes. And I think that was extremely insightful. But Agile also did something else. It pointed out the weakness of the value stream within IT. Because what we ended up with was a very efficient, quality-driven, velocity-driven software factory. However, we did nothing in terms of the work in front of the software factory, such as requirements planning, infrastructure, and security. And Agile wasn't really focused or talking about anything after the software factory, such as configuration updates, maintenance, and additional security, and adjustment to new and emergent business needs. So what we did is we took one piece of the value stream And we really, really strengthened it. And we introduced flow. But in many organizations, the outcome of that was simply to highlight the weakness of the rest of the value stream, as well as create a backlog of ship-ready product features that the company either wasn't ready for or operations in IT was not ready to support. So Agile brings some great tools and concepts, but it's not the whole picture. It's very important, but it's certainly not enough. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient at the value stream level. Well, what was the answer to that? The response to that, of course, was the DevOps community that came along and said, how can we expand our vision of applying these concepts across the value stream? And we basically got the DevOps movement, first inspired by the Phoenix Project, which is a wonderful book that really took a lean manufacturing book called The Goal and rewrote it in an IT environment. It's a brilliant piece of work. But what I think is most fascinating about DevOps is it reignited the imagination of the IT community that we can be so much more and we can improve at a value stream level. Now you notice so much of this goes back to the value stream and is tied back to the value stream. And of course, those concepts are deeply embedded in lean thinking. A good friend of mine once said that Agile and DevOps really are placed on a chassis of lean thinking. And I think that's a great metaphor, a chassis, kind of like the chassis of an automobile. So DevOps talks about the three ways, and I actually had the great opportunity to work with Gene Kim as he was writing the Phoenix Project, and over many conversations we talked at length about lean. The three ways that came out of those conversations that are included in the goal are system flow, this focus on, once again, the value stream, seeing the whole, realizing that one change in one part of the system is going to affect another part of the system. So really stepping back and getting a view that is much more horizontal versus vertical, and seeing the entire system. This is extremely difficult to do. We can know about it, we can understand it, but it's really very difficult to execute. Introducing amplification of feedback loops. So we have shorter feedback loops and faster signals so we can adjust more quickly. And of course, creating a culture of experimentation and moving towards mastery. Now, this ties so well to the 5 core principles of lean thinking that we saw just a couple of minutes ago. If you think about it, these core concepts are lean concepts. They really are original lean concepts. There's nothing new here, but I think they're extremely well stated within an IT environment. So you take those 3 pieces that we've just talked about, and you say, how do they work together? And let's not forget service management. Service management is obviously a key component in most IT organizations. Well, I like to say, here we are, we're kind of, everybody is waiting to see what comes out with ITIL 4.0, but in the pieces I've seen, there is a real emphasis on velocity and lean and DevOps and Agile. We'll talk about that in a minute. But really, if you look at it in terms of where did we start? We started with lean, with this focus on value and the value streams and flow, pull, and continuous service improvement. If we look at ITIL, we see we still have this best practices framework. With 4.0, we're going to see, I believe, much more of an emphasis on how we work with all 3 of these bodies of knowledge, Lean, Agile, and DevOps, with a focus on how do we create velocity? How do we move the IT value faster to respond to the organization? When we look at Agile, Agile brings us this whole contribution around iterative development, visual management, product ownership, and what I like to call real teamwork, because we've all worked on teams that were nothing but a label. We were called a team, but we didn't work as a team. And Agile really emphasizes that we are collaborating, we're working together, not at cross purposes, and we're all successful or we're all not successful. That's kind of what we need across the IT value stream, and we've got a long way to go. And then DevOps comes along with this more holistic approach, looking at IT as much more of a life cycle, which is something that ITIL has tried to do and talked about for many years. And also, of course, introduces the 3 ways. So I think you've got to really take all of these pieces together to have any chance of creating true sustaining IT value. And when the people on our teams realize that these are all complementary components of continuous service improvement, it no longer becomes a battle between I'm doing lean and you're doing agile, or we don't believe in lean because we're doing DevOps. We don't need lean thinking. That's just silly. You look at this and you realize it's much more of a holistic system of improvement. And it's much more of the word and versus the word or. So I love this quote. George Box was a mathematician, but I think this is so important. He said, essentially, all models are wrong, but some are useful. That is a great way to look at it. In other words, there's nothing sacred about any of the models. None of them are 100% correct or appropriate at all times, but they can be useful. They can be useful in terms of us thinking clearly about what we're doing, about embracing continuous improvement, about creating much more collaborative efforts in IT and the business, and really creating a culture of success. And often I just don't see that, regardless of any amount of IT training we've done or the amount of rituals that we've impressed on our people. So this is something to think about. There's no sacred model. There's no one model out there. It's much more of an emergent discovery. And when we think of the 3rd way, this culture of experimentation and mastery, we're constantly learning new things, validating our understanding through small experiments, and then sharing that learning. And that really in the lean principles is tied up in this improve forever. In terms of agile, you'll see that in the retrospective. And in terms of DevOps, you see that in the 3rd way. So that's a real common piece, but it's amazing because I see that piece is often missing. We think that training alone is going to get it done, and really that's just the start. That's not even close to creating a true culture of continuous service improvement. So what we want to move to is a much more happy community where we can all sit at the table and realize that lean, agile, DevOps, and other methodologies can certainly coexist, and we take a portion of what we need to get the job done. But they certainly are not exclusive, and they don't cancel each other out, and they're certainly not at odds. So we just kind of need to get along and play well together and see that there's value in all of them. So I'd like to give you a few key takeaways, and I think it's just so important that we talk about these. The first takeaway is we need alignment of purpose. So often, if you talk to people in the business and certainly in IT, and you say, what is our true north, or what is our purpose, or why are we doing this, or what matters most, you get different answers. So no wonder our behaviors can be at cross odds, and no wonder we really are not seeing a value stream approach or systems thinking. So alignment of purpose is super important. And if our leaders are not aligned, our managers are not aligned. If our managers are not aligned, of course, our people on the front line are certainly not working in the same direction. And often I see that we say, well, of course we're aligned. There's a poster on the wall that says why we exist. And that's just not enough. So someone once said the most important thing managers do is clarify purpose and create culture. So clarifying purpose is huge, and I just don't see enough of that there. So if we really want to align between these different bodies of knowledge, we need people to really, really be clear on purpose. So what is our purpose? What is our strategy to get there? And how are we measuring it? Are very important questions that often people can't answer. And we need to take a hard look in the mirror and ask ourselves, what are we doing to really address that? Have we addressed that, or are we just assuming that people know what's important? The next key takeaway is value stream level improvement is really the only thing that matters. Now, that's a pretty strong statement, but I'm making it because I really want to get your attention here. Improvement that doesn't impact the value stream is not felt by the customer. It may be felt by a stakeholder in the value stream, but it doesn't reach the paying customer, the external customer, the customer that's paying the bill. And we can spend a lot of time and energy and money making localized improvements that are really canceled out because later in the value stream, those improvements are absorbed in a wasteful operation, or in something that's taking so long that we simply what we've done is introduce velocity or efficiency in one area to create a bottleneck or a constraint in another area. So we really need to change our paradigm and how we're looking at everything and say it really is a systems approach. So it's interesting that this is so heavily emphasized within the lean model. It is demonstrated quite clearly in the agile model, and it is highlighted in the DevOps model. Whether we call this systems thinking or value stream management or flow within a sprint, this is value stream level improvement. Now, if you look at Agile, you could clearly say the one thing that Agile didn't try to do this, and the one thing that happened was because Agile introduced an improvement at the software development level, not the value stream level, it highlighted the fact that the IT value stream really didn't have flow, both before the software development piece and afterwards. The third key takeaway I'd like to suggest is very important. I believe you're going to be, well, we're already hearing a lot, but I think we're going to be hearing even more about the importance of velocity. I mean, really, that's what these three methodologies are all about. The velocity in terms of resolution of problems, time to market, new functionality, velocity of development, etc. But I'd like to suggest that while velocity is a wonderful thing, and we certainly want to go for it, we need to always remember first quality, then velocity. So first we need to improve our systems and prove our capability before we go fast. So like anything else, first you would learn something until it became fairly automatic before you started to emphasize the speed at which you did something. And I see many organizations that get wrapped up in time, and this is a key metric that we use, of course. We use time in so many metrics within IT, but often we lose track of the fact that we really need quality. And we talk about quality at the source. What that really means is we're doing it right the first time. So quality first, then velocity. And the last takeaway I'd like to share with you today is that there are two sides to lasting improvement. And this is super important because, and I've seen this, you know, I've been working in this area for decades now, and I've just seen this over and over and over. There are two sides to sustainable, long-lasting improvement. One is technical innovation. The other is what I like to call social integrity. We need to balance the two. So what are those two? Technical innovation, everyone on the call knows what that's about. That's about introducing new technology, new ways of doing work, and the rate of change in technology and IT is phenomenal. It's an exciting time to be alive. That's great. But often in many IT transformations that I see, the whole focus is on technical innovation. However, we need a balanced approach between technical innovation and the social side. So I call it social integrity. What I mean by that is creating a safe culture where we have a true transformation because we have a wholeness around how we do the work. We have a safety. We have a culture of collaboration. And we really have eliminated the fear. Now, that's a strong word, but often people don't even realize that we have patterns of behavior that have built up over time to kind of protect our position on the team, defend our credibility, etc. And in a true learning environment, we're going to be trying new things. And if we're not making mistakes, we're not trying hard enough. And if we're not making mistakes, we're not going to be learning fast enough to keep up with the competition. Now, Agile has talked about, and DevOps has talked about hurry up and fail, or fail fast. So that concept's been around, or that cliche's been around for a long time. But if you look at IT teams, I'm not seeing a lot of hurry up and fail fast. I'm seeing a lot of do what we know is safe. And this gets into this tension between the stability that IT is expected to create and the innovation that IT is expected to deliver. And that is a tension between those two. So I'm not saying this is in any way easy, but in my experience, the easy part of an IT transformation is the technology. The much more challenging part is the social side. It's the people side. It's creating a culture of mutual respect, trust, and collaboration. And I would say that that is the side that is often either ignored or given a very, very, people know we respect them, and we'll throw a party occasionally, or we'll try to recognize somebody. But this is really the piece that if we don't do a good job, it doesn't matter how much training we do or how much new technology we bring in, it's not going to work. It just isn't going to work. So please try to see this as two sides of the coin, the technical side and the people side, and they both need to be addressed. So we need to get everybody feeling like they're playing on the same team. So we're not in separate camps. We're all on the same team. We have different roles to play. We may use slightly different terminology, but we're aligned in our purpose. We're focused on the value stream. That's really the key. So we'll open it up for questions at this point. If somebody wants to contact me, there's my contact information. And Simone, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, perfect. I will just quickly show a few slides I wanted to make you aware of. Thank you very much, Mike, for this great explanation. We've received a lot of compliments about the content. It really helps. And I will just, yes, it works. I will just explain a little bit how EXIN can help with your DevOps exploration journey or implementation. So we have a full program for in certifications. We offer the program for IT professionals. This program was developed in cooperation with international experts, like we do all our programs. This is really to make sure that we deliver the right content and it resonates with what's happening in the world right now and in organizations right now. The experts come from various parts of the world, like the US, India, China, the Netherlands. And the same goes for the certifications. They are available in many languages. So it's really easy for everybody to understand what it is about and to start a journey in DevOps. The purpose of the DevOps program is to prepare and support professionals from different levels and with different goals. Those who need to initiate and join DevOps teams, and also those that need to implement the practices and the culture in the organization. And this is the full overview of the certification scheme we deliver in DevOps. It starts at the DevOps Foundation. It's not live yet, but it will become live in January. We will all make you aware of that, and you can already start get ready for it. The book will be available soon. I will send it out in a note as well. The foundation is the entry-level certification. It's designed to offer professionals on the business or IT side an accessible way to get started with DevOps. And it delivers a solid base for anyone who wants to grow in the DevOps field. It's a good entry for the DevOps professional or the master program. Once you've done the foundation, you will understand the main practices and benefits of DevOps. The topics covered in the exam will include the value stream, the deployment pipeline, version control, configuration management, and a definition of done. Then the next level is the DevOps professional. It is to give IT professional background knowledge and understanding of essential DevOps practices, created as a good entry to the DevOps Master certification. And the certification looks at the three ways: the good habits of change control and maintaining security compliance. And then the last, or the master program, is an advanced level certification, and it teaches candidates a combination of principles, knowledge, and practical skills. And it will enable them to introduce and promote DevOps in their organization in order to better manage application service life cycles whilst facilitating collaborative teamwork. So this is the whole program. Why you would get certified with EXIN? We have a lot of nice benefits here. But beyond that, we really love to welcome you to EXIN. We'd like to have a discussion with you how we can help you roll out DevOps for your team, or offer programs that we have developed and will be benefit for your market or your needs. Just let us know how we can help you further. This is the end of the webinar, and I will now jump into the questions. As we have a lot, I'll just make sure that I go to the questions. Here you are. A question to you, Mike. Can you give an example of an artifact related to DevOps? Oh. Mike, we can't hear you. I see you're on mute.
Me.
Here
Okay.
you are.
So I believe so. That's an interesting question, an artifact related to DevOps. I can certainly answer that, but before I do, I'd like to say that artifacts are uh, are are important but secondary. I would suggest that behavior related to DevOps might be even more significant. But certainly there are artifacts related to DevOps. Again, it's much more. It's Is it an artifact related to DevOps or Lean is not really the question, as we've just discussed. So I'd rather, if I could, take the liberty of saying what is an artifact related to creating value that flows across the IT value stream would be better than saying what is an artifact for DevOps, again, because we need to align on purpose. It's not about DevOps, it's about creating value and flow. So a key artifact would be a evolving value stream map. So many IT organizations don't really have a picture of what it is that they're trying to flow, what it is that they're trying to improve, or the impact of their contribution, whether it's a department or a team or a technology stack. They really have no concept of where they fit in that overall portrait. So an artifact which would come out of a value stream mapping session would be both a current state value stream map, a future state value stream map, which would show, which would create a roadmap, if you will, of how we move from where we are right now towards what might be called more of a DevOps environment or more of a systems thinking approach to flowing IT, or more of an evolution of technology. That would be an example of an artifact.
Thank you. Then the next question is, how can an organization build or improve feedback channel in the value stream to know if improvements are really improvement or not just change?
That's an excellent question. So there's many ways to do it, but the first thing we need to do is realize that we're almost in 2019. So I've seen a few organizations that are using chat ops and basically making it very easy for people to use chat for real-time feedback. Now, there are certainly measures and metrics, and that's important too. I'm not saying let's not do it, but we need more opportunities for feedback. So some things I've seen is chat ops, where we're having people simply get on chat and instant messaging and very quickly in real time letting people know. I've also seen automation tools where we can signal when we have failures. There's a concept from Lean called the undone. So the undone is a cord that was pulled on the factory line when there was a problem, and then everyone would swarm over it. Kind of sets off a light or an alarm. Everyone swarms to that problem. And I believe the undone cord in IT is the service desk. That's one of the key undons. So what we should be doing is creating a feedback mechanism to know it's almost like the pulse of the organization. What were the issues? We'll certainly hear about the incidents, but if we want to be proactive, we should be saying, what are some of the concerns? In Lean, we call it a near miss. So can we create a feedback mechanism where we know that something, maybe it wasn't a catastrophic failure, it wasn't an incident, but something isn't quite right? I call it an early warning system. So you might say, well, how do you find these? Well, the first thing you need to do, again, I hate to be a broken record, but we need to understand, what is the value stream? Because I need to know, first of all, I need to know and collaborate and know by name and be able to talk with and communicate with my neighbors. So what is the group that represents the input or the information that comes to me, and my work output, where does that go? What I found is many of these teams barely talk to one another. Sometimes they're physically next to each other, other times they're in different countries. But the fact that they're not communicating, the first place to start is to say, okay, I want these feedback mechanisms, and can I just go shift left one and shift right one and even create a feedback there? But I really want a feedback chain. I also, this is a case where I definitely want to look at velocity, because I want my feedback to be as close to real time as possible. Now, I don't want too much noise, but when there's an issue, if I hear about it soon, then the trail and the evidence is accessible. If I hear about it in 2 weeks or on Friday because we have a meeting, often it's too late. The evidence is gone. The recollection of what the issue was has aged, and the energy isn't there. So I would start by asking yourself, what feedback mechanisms do we have in place right now? Years ago, I had a coach that asked me a great question. What information do I need to know? What information do I need to share? Now, you can't answer that question properly without talking to your stakeholders and other members of the value stream. So I think that might be a great place to start.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we have got another question from Jan. What is the difference between a value stream and a traditional ITIL practice?
Yeah, so that's another good question. So you may be interested in looking at, I've got a course on value stream mapping, but we talk about this to a large degree. A value stream map I like to describe as an artificially linear visual depiction of the way that work gets done. And what we're really looking at is focusing on, it's not so high, it's not 20,000 feet high, so you don't see the process, but we're looking at the core activities that we go through to create and manage value. And we're looking at a few key metrics. They're around quality, number one, time, number two. We also identify pain points and bottlenecks and open issues and what we know and we don't know. So the reason I call it artificially linear is we know that IT is inherently iterative. So we've got a lot of back and forth and a lot of partially completed work, and we're waiting for other pieces. That's not necessarily depicted. So we're not trying to create an overly complicated map. The whole purpose of the map is to gain a shared understanding of where we are and where we need to go. So if somebody said, is it really about creating a map? I would say, no, it's not about creating a map. A map is a means for us to get alignment on what we need to improve. Now we're back to the 3 ways of DevOps. So alignment of what? Alignment of a systems thinking approach to creating value and flowing that value. A feedback mechanism, so we have rapid feedback to see whether or not our experiments are better or worse than they were before, and a culture of true experimentation. And again, most organizations that I've worked with are not doing experiments. They're trying things. That's not the same thing as an experiment. Just trying something is not an experiment. So it's a very, very different thing. When I think of an ITIL process, you can look at an ITIL process, but often an ITIL process is almost more of a standard. When I think of a value stream map, I think of what are we doing, not what should we be doing, not what do we say we're doing, but what are we actually doing. So it's a snapshot, if you will, of today's current practice versus a defined process, be it an ITIL or any other book or manual.
Okay, then we've got a question from Jeremy. Can you share the most important things you've learned moving IT stuff from writing code, deploying technology to delivering value to customers?
I would say that by far the most important thing I've learned is that the social side, the people side of managing successful change in IT is much harder than anything else. And it's the side that we tend to think is covered already. So we don't give it as much depth or as much attention or as much weight. So we train people in the technical skills, and we need to. And I'm not saying we can turn our back on that. We've got to keep up with technology and innovation and everything that's available to us. That's a must. But I would say the biggest thing, as I reflect back in my experience, is that we don't do a great job in terms of developing ourselves personally and our teams and our managers and our leaders. That's a whole nother discipline which we kind of think is going to take care of itself. And for many years, I thought that this was addressed by this wonderful concept called change management. And this may be a little controversial, and I'm sure some people are not going to be happy with me for saying this, but I think most change management methods and models are logically correct, but I do not see them successfully supporting change. I see them coercing people into change, but as soon as we let our foot off the gas, the change goes away. So it doesn't matter what model I'm using. I guess the biggest learning that I've had is the change has to come from within. And you can't get that by pushing from the outside.
Okay, clear. Then we've got a question from Marie. We have people calling DevOps a process, which is, I believe, is incorrect. So should the terminology be value stream, or is DevOps a collection of disciplines and practices?
Well, you know, that's a great question. And I don't believe, if you think about what we've talked about today, it's not really what should it be, it's what do we agree to call it. So if somebody says, you know, we don't use the term value stream, I think the wrong approach is to say, oh, you're wrong. You're wrong. You know, this is a value stream. You're calling it something else. It's more, let's just be clear on what we're describing. Now, I believe it certainly helps if we can agree on a lexicon of terminology. And I've worked with a few organizations where we've adopted a lexicon and put it online. So when somebody says, start talking about a tool chain, and I'm in a meeting and I'm thinking, what are they talking about? I can go look it up. And I can say, okay, this is the agreed upon definition. This is what we mean. So whether we call it a DevOps process or a tool chain or a value stream or another one I've seen recently is a value chain, this can confuse people. So I think it's less about, well, what is the right word or the right term? Am I using this correctly? As let's just develop consensus and agreement within our organization. Because think of the timeline. This is really an emerging field of understanding. So I think we want to get away from what is the right answer to, I mean, there are some fundamentals that we can all agree on, but I think it's much more important to say, what is the shared understanding that we're talking about? So I am, I love the concept of value stream, because you can talk about flow, a stream flows, and people just can kind of wrap their heads around that. But if your organization calls it something else, that's okay if they understand it and if it works for them, particularly if it drives the right behavior.
Okay, then I've got a kind of a statement from Peter. He says, is it correct that ITIL is the what and Lean, Agile, and DevOps are the how to do it?
You know, I've heard that many times, and I think that's pretty close to the truth. I don't pretend to be an ITIL expert, but in the training I've had and the reading I've had and in the numerous discussions I've had, I think that's a fairly good way to see it. ITIL is a framework of best practices that defines a lot of components and relationships, and I think it's an extremely elegant framework if we only lived it. But often what I see is you can go through the ITIL model and you can say, wow, that's pretty amazing, and then you can ask yourself, how much of this do we do? and often it's we picked a few pieces. So we do incident, we do change, we do problem, but you know, there's a whole lot of the model that we're not doing. But I think that's not a bad way to look at it. There's also a lot of what in Lean, DevOps, and Agile, but I think there's a lot more how. In all of them, and I'm guessing in 4.0 what we're going to see is 4.0 is going to also start talking about learning and experimentation and iterative experiments. I can't see how they could update ITIL and not join the community in this area. So I think that distinction is valid, certainly with 3.0. We may see that start to fade a little bit, but I haven't seen 4.0 other than a couple of things on the internet, which are all preliminary. I think we're going to see everything beginning in right around now, and certainly the first of 2019.
Okay. I think we've got time for one more question. There's one question from Arno coming back on the previous statement you made about experimenting.
Yes.
Can you give an example of a good experiment?
Yeah, so a good experiment begins with a clear problem statement. So what is the problem or opportunity that we're trying to address? And often I see people go out and try things, but they haven't done that. So first of all, I need to say, what is the pain point or what is the opportunity? What does that happen to be? So I need to articulate that, and I have to write it down. Then I need to be very clear on my baseline. So where are we right now? If I do, and I need to measure that baseline. So in other words, if I say, well, we're introducing an application that's going to speed up incident resolution. Wonderful, that sounds good. What's our performance like right now? If I don't have a baseline, then I cannot really measure the impact of my change. And then perhaps most importantly, I need a hypothesis, or I need an if-then statement. I need to say, so we are suggesting that if we do this, we will get that. And I want it to be measurable. Now I can run an experiment. So I know where I am. I've got my baseline. I framed it within a problem or opportunity that I'm trying to address. Now I can run the experiment. Then I measure the results of that experiment, compare them to what I expected, and I learn from the outcome. I should also, if I'm really running an experiment, I should really, really, really expect the experiment not to work. And this is hard. This is extremely hard. But the reason I say that is if we expect the experiment not to work, we come towards the experiment with an attitude of curiosity and humility. So healthy curiosity, we want to be like a cat looking at a mouse hole, really, really looking deeply. Something might pop out at any second. So we need to be that alert. Humility, what I mean by humility is we acknowledge the fact that we don't have a complete understanding of this problem. So there's something that needs to be learned and understood that we do not have right now. When we've got the humility and we've got that healthy curiosity, our minds become hungry. And when we're hungry and we really, really we want to know, we want to learn, we want to grow, then it's an experiment. Because the energy is there, the attitude is there, and the learning will come. Because if the experiment has an outcome different than what we expected, we say, fascinating, what does that tell us? If the experiment validates what we thought was going to happen, and now we know that we've actually learned something. Now, what I often see is we learn something, but we do not codify the learning. In other words, we don't make a change to our work process, and we don't share that learning with somebody else. Instead, we just say, well, now we're just going to make the change. But when we make the change without capturing the learning and sharing the learning, we basically create tribal knowledge, which is just another form of debt. It's like a social debt because not everybody understands it, and it's going to just create more complexity in the future. So we really need to make it much more out in the open and transparent. The only way this works is if we create a ritual of learning. So Agile tried to do this when they introduced the retrospective. And one of the fascinating things I've seen just in the past few years is what we've done is the retrospectives were a great activity. Pain points were identified, but not a lot of problem solving or experimentation came out of that. So what we've done is link the retrospective to lean structured problem solving. And we've done this in a DevOps environment and an Agile environment. And it's worked extremely well because it ties to many of the things that Simone was talking about, such as visual management, standardized work, metrics that matter, and on and on and on. This never ends. It's exciting stuff because you're never really done working on it. I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you for answering all the questions and the presentation. Oh yeah, I just got a reply. It does indeed. This is the end of the webinar. And there are more questions, but we will answer them in an email to everybody individually. As said, I will send the recording to everybody. And Mike, thank you so much for this webinar.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.